Hi, good afternoon or good evening. My name is Chimobi, and you're welcome to Shots with Chimobi at Kengoon's tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about data types in Python. Sorry, not data type, the string data type in Python. The string data type in Python. So we have lots of different kinds of data type. We have the integers, the float, and so on, of which the string is one of them. Without further ado, let's dive into what the string data type are, and we'll look at string operations, the operations we can perform on strings. We'll look at built-in string functions. We'll look at string indexing, string slicing, and built-in string methods. So by the end of this lecture, you should be comfortable working with strings in your Python program. Hopefully, you should be comfortable doing any operation performing actions with strings in your program. Now, what are strings? Like I mentioned, we are going to be talking about the string data type in Python. And the string is a kind of data type. It's a data type in Python, just like every other data type in Python. And we can perform lots of operations, lots of actions on this string data type. First of all, we'll start with some string operations. We are going to look at three major operations we are going to perform on strings, like three major operations that are performable on strings. And for that, we are going to be looking at using one of our files, the file here where I said string operations. So for the sake of making this video short, I have written some pre-written um programs. Wait, before we go into string operations, sorry. Now, how do we write strings in Python? So that's important. So now, basically, what you're seeing here is a string, right? This is a string, but this is not the major way we write strings in Python. So for us to write string in Python, I could use anything surrounded by a single or a double quote is noted as a string. So I can write boy, can put boy in double quotes. This is what we call a string. Okay, this noise. Either ways, this is what we call a string literal, right? So this is basically me writing a string. I can also put another string bring in a single quotes, and I can also use this triple quotes. So these are basically ways of writing strings. And like every other data type, we can always assign them to a variable. So I can just come here and say name is equals to null. So I'm assigning this string here that I'm calling null. I'm assigning it to a variable called name. And I could also come here and do color is equals to green, and I'm assigning this green to this color variable. We obviously should know what the variable are. If you don't know what variable as, the best and the first definition I can give you, variable are containers that contain a data type that we can give a label to. So color is like a container that contains the green data type, right? So anytime I try to print color, I'll be printing this green. Let's not go into what variables are. Remember, our focus for this lecture is strings. So now these are basically ways of declaring string. And this triple quote I use in declaring string, I could also assign it to a variable. I could also call this topic, and I could say topic equals to this, and you see that it's a valid Python code, right? I could also do this, but we don't usually do this triple quotes. We use them mostly for documentation and so on and so forth. But this is also possible, and this also helps you to create multi-line strings in Python. This makes you create multi-line strings in Python, right? Now let's go to string operations. There are lots of operations that can be performed on string, but we are going to be looking at three of them. And for that, I have created a separate file so that everything looks neat. Now, we have the plus operation, so we can perform a plus operation to a string. So I can decide to come down here, and I can have in double quotes kene, and I could have plus space Chimobi, right? This operation is valid, and this isn't such a bad code. But what Replit is doing, so Replit is the online editor I'm using. I know you must be familiar with PyCharm, but today I'm going to be using Replit for the sake of my recording, right? So now I could just give this a variable. I could just keep this into a variable. I could call this combined names. And I could say it equals to Kene plus Chimobi. So this plus operator is a valid operator in Python for strings. And what this does is just literally adds Kene to Chimobi, right? It carries my name, each characters in this name, carries each characters in Chimobi and adds them to Kene. So when I print these combined names, I should be getting Kene Chimobi. So let's go ahead and print it. I could do print combined names, right? When I do that and I'll come to our shell, one way to run your program in the way I'll be running my program on Replica is by using the Python 3 interpreter. So I could say Python 3, then the name of the file I want to run, which is string operations. Okay, string operations.py. And when I run it, you can see Kenneth Chimobi. And you might be wondering, where did this space come from? The space is basically this tiny space that I left here before writing Chimobi. So if I remove that space, Python will literally just jam pack everything together. So space is a valid character in Python. So it will give us that space. So if I do this now, and you see that connection movie is basically written together, it's basically cut in like jam packed together. So we've seen this is the plus operator, right? We can use the addition operator, and basically we could even add more stuff. I could even come here and say print combined names plus Ima, right? And when I run this code, I can write Kene Chimobi Ima, and that will be a valid Python code. So now let's look at the multiplicator operator. How does this operator work in Python? This multiplication operator. So now basically I'm going to create another variable. So I'm going to comment this out so that we don't get distracted by it. So now I could just have a variable name and I can assign it to let's see, Esther. So now if I want to print Esther 3 times, I could easily come here and do print name times 3. That's one of the mysterious things about Python, how this works. So I have programmed in JavaScript before, I've written programs in C before, but this thing you're seeing here is so Pythonic that it cannot, like, if you throw an error, if you try it on C or in JavaScript, right? If you throw an error, but you can see that with this, I can print Esther 3 times. So let's run this program, Python string operations.py, and you can see it printed Esther 3 times. If I wanted to have that space, I could just end this string here with space, and Python will include that space, and it will write Esther 3 times. So you print Esther 3 times. So another thing to know that is that you can also like use the multiplication operator with 0, and when you do that, you are getting an empty string. So you obviously not getting anything. You get a blank line. You could also use negative numbers, but I've never seen that in use. But and that also means you're also getting an empty string. So you might be asking yourself, what are the use cases? When will I use this stuff? Don't worry. That a time will come when you will get to like understand how this works and use them in an actual program. Now, the last part of the string operation we are going to be looking at is a very interesting one. The one that saves us a lot of time. And if you've heard about loops, this operator like makes it easier for you not to use loop when you are working with strings. Not that you won't, not that it makes loops useless, but like it saves a lot of time. And the operator we are talking about is the in operator. So let's keep on using our Esther variable now. Let's keep using this Esther variable. So now I could come down here and say print e, and I will use the in keyword name. Now remember, name is just like a reference to Esther. Like name holds, okay, I need to put this in quotes, right? This is a string, I need to put it in quotes. So in single or double or triple quote, whichever one you want to use. But like I said earlier, the triple quote is usually not being used. So now E in name, this will basically return true or false. So what Python does is it will check this entire string to know if it will find a character E in that name, Esther. So we are basically representing Esther with this name. And let's see what we get when we print this. So if I do Python, I could always use my upper key, right? Yeah, I do that. So we get true. And in by the time you start writing advanced programming, you see reasons why you might want to use such kind of operation in Python, right? So you could also, and something I should warn you about is that these letters that I'm checking, they are case sensitive, right? So if I do smaller e, I might still get through because there's a smaller e in Esther. Yeah, obviously I should get through, right? I should get through. But if I should remove that smaller e, you will notice that I will be getting first because the characters that are being searched there are case sensitive. So that's that for Python operations, like operations we are going to have in Python that we have in Python. So these are the basic three operations, and now we are going to be moving at the next thing in our list, which is built-in string functions. So for that, I've also created a file already. Like I said, this video is going to be as short as possible. So I decided to create separate files so that I don't have to create them while recording the videos. So we have built-in functions that you can call on strings, and for that, like I said, I created this built-in functions.py file. So there are lots of built-in functions in Python that you can use on strings, but we are just going to be looking at these two built-in function. Now, built-in the we are going to look at the first of all the length built-in function. So this function, this length built-in function, it takes the string. So this here, this s inside can is the name or the variable that we've given to the string. So this function gets into the string, counts how many characters are in that string, then returns the number. So it's not returning a string, it's returning the number of characters you can find in the string. So let's say we have let's see a school variable. Sorry, that was an error by me. Control Z, Control Z. Sorry. So we have a school variable, and we say equals to ALX, right? So now if we call the length function on this school variable, or even at on ALX directly, we will get the length of ALX. But first of all, let's just do print so that we can see what we get. Length of school. So if we do this, we should be getting 3, because obviously if we count it as humans, we can count 1, 2, 3. So I could just come here and run Python 3, built-in. So you can see that I got 3. Another thing I can also do is I can also decide to directly, I can decide not to put it into a variable. I can just do length of I could just put Kengoon, right? Then when I run this code, it will also return the it will also return the length of school. Like that is our first print statement. Then to go down and return the length of Kengoon. That's basically what the length function does. Now let's go to the string function. Now what the string function basically does, so the string function basically converts a non-string data type to a string. So you remember when I told you that a string is anything that is circulated by double or single quotes. Anything we have in between double or single quotes is a string. So I could have a data type like this. I could have a data like age, for instance, and I could say age equals to 12, right? Now, if I want this 12 to become a string, I can always call the string str function on age. And this function will return a, it will return a string for me, right? It will return a string, it will return age, but as a string, it will return 12, but as a string. If I print 12, we get, let's run this code and see what we get. So Python will basically print it as a normal 12. It will not surround it as to not surround it with quote as we've been seeing earlier. But one thing we can do is we can use the type the type function. That's another function. We could use the type function on that. So basically, we are calling a string function to convert this age to a string. And when it converts it, it gets passed into this type function. This type function will tell us the data type, the kind of data that that the object, that the parameter it's calling is. So if we run this code now, we should see something like class string. So that is what the string function does. The next part of the course we're going to be talking about is string indexing, and as usual, I've created a file for that. So string indexing, in programming in general, um, strings are arranged alphabetically. It simply means that we can get each character in that string one after the other. Like we can not one after the other, basically we can get any of the characters there using string indexing. So the string is an ordered sequence, and we can always try to get a particular character from that string. So say for instance we have a string. We have a string like let's say sentence is not necessarily going to be assistant. I am a girl, right? With string indexing, let me just put underscores here. So don't worry, never mind. Let's just use a space like that. So with string indexing, I can get this character A, right? I can get it individually and work with it if I want to, right? So by indexing will also mean that strings are like organized in an index format, like they are organized from 0 to the length of the string minus 1. So this first I here is at index 0. The space here is at space are also included. So it's the space here is at index 1, the A here is at index 3, and so on and so forth. So if I want to get this girl, I is at index 1, space is at index 2, A is at index 3, M is at index 1 and 4, space is at index 5, A is at index 6, space is at index 7, G is at index 8. So I could come and say print sentence at so index 8. So we use this bracket notation to tell Python, okay, we just want a character at this index, right? We just want a character at this index. Just get us that character. So you write the name of the variable, then you open and close this parentheses, then you inside the parentheses you put the index you want to get here. So if I come here and run Python string indexing, we should get I. Wait, let's count again. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that 8 is I. So G is at index 7, right? So I can also run this. If I run this, I should get G now, right? So indexing meaning that their string starts from 0 till the length of the string minus 1. Also, you can also use negative indexing. So instead of 7, I could put minus 1. But for negative indexing, it starts from the back. So minus 1 represents this last element, this last character L here. So instead of like, if you just want to get the last of any element, instead of like counting it, you can just use minus 1. And if I write Python, you see we get L. If I do minus 2, we get R. So that is that about indexing. You could use indexing to get individual characters. So string indexing, you can use indexing using this bracket notation to get individual characters in a string. So now let's talk about slicing in Python. Let's talk about slicing. So slicing is works almost like indexing, but slicing like gets you more than one character. So imagine that I don't just want one character, I want like a car a number of characters. You could use slicing to get those characters. So let's assume I have a variable called somewhere some. Let me just call it some for sake of time, and I'll have ALX Africa. Right now, imagine I want to get A till X, right? I don't just want to get this character. It works the same thing as indexing. So you must have guessed right. I could just come and I could create a new variable. I could say parts, and I could just say sum. The same way indexing works, almost the same way, but this time around, so I want to get from A, which is the start of the index. I could just write 0, but writing only 0 would get me A, but I want to get A and X, right? So I will just put colon and I'll put 3, right? Now it will now get me the first element, which is at index 0, get me the second element, which is at index 1, get me the third element, which is at index 2. Now the number I specified there is 3, and you might be assuming it will get me this place, but Python doesn't do that. It doesn't include this number you put here. So it only gets you the number from index 0 till 2, excluding that 3 you put. So if I wanted just A and L, I would just do 0 till 2, and it will get me the characters at index 0, index 1, but it will not get me the character at index 2. So if I decide to print part now, print part, you would see that we will get ALX. Oh, I'm running the wrong Python file. Hopefully you know how I'm running this Python file. So you can see we got ALX. So if I only want to get A and L, I could just come here and remove those three and impute 2, and it will get me the character in the 0 and the character in the 1, but it will not get me the character in index 2. So this 2, you just say stop here, don't get to 2, don't get me that part of 2, and that is how slicing works. Pretty easy, right? Then now let's move on to string methods. So next up is the string methods. There are a lot of string methods, right? Basically methods are kinds of functions in Python, like they are function, but there is something we call object-oriented programming in Python. You get to learn about them, but methods are just like functions, but like they are applied differently. So now instead of like calling the function and putting the string or the variable you want inside the string, this time around you are calling it like after you've written your variable and calling, you see how we use it in due time. But what I'm basically trying to tell you is that methods are like function, they are almost the same time function, but it's more like they are bundled with string and say, okay, these are the kind of functions that are meant for strings. Go, 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 go. These are the, if you call this kind of method on another data type, it might not work, but it will always work for string, right? So that's basically what methods are, and we have lots of them, but we are going to be looking at only these four. You can check other ones online, right? So now, as usual, we will use an example. I will just write name, and I could just put Naomi as the name here. So if I want to, let me make this Naomi a small letter now. As sometimes we usually see that writing someone's name with smaller letters for some rare reason doesn't make sense. He starts with a capital letter. So assuming you're a programmer and you decided like, oh, that's a mistake, I want to capitalize it. Now manually you could actually go into there and capitalize it, but there's a string capitalize function. Imagine if you use this name in various places, you wouldn't go there to change it manually. So you can always use the dot capitalize function, right? So I would just say print name now dot capitalize, right? Capitalize. Now you can see how I call this method. This is basically like a function, but normally what we usually see is that this name would be inside here. But this is a method, not a function, though they are basically the same thing. But later on, you will learn the difference between method and function when you get to start learning object-oriented program. But it's a good practice that you know that there's something called a method that can be called on name to make this first letter now N in Naomi to be capitalized. So if I run this code now, Python methods py, you see that Naomi, the N in Naomi has been capitalized. Now the same thing, this it's almost the same thing like the lower function. The dot lower function basically converts every capital letter to a smaller letter. So let's assume I everything we have here is Naomi in capital letter. If I call the dot, if I call the dot, sorry, I need to copy this. I'm being a little bit lazy. So if I call the dot lower function, it will change all this string. It will basically convert all the string to lower case and return it to print, then prints it out, right? So if I run our code again, you see that Naomi, which initially here are all in caps, are being taken to lower case. And from what I explained about dot lower, you should be able to take guess what the dot upper method does. And now I will just skip that and go to the dot count. Now the dot count does one thing, right? It counts the number of characters that are in that string. So assuming I may spell Naomi like this. So Naomi. Now I could use the dot count method. I could use that method to count how many of the character O, how many of the character O appears in let me comment this so that we don't get distracted by it. So I can just print, I can say name dot count, and this time around we are providing an argument to count. Like the capitalized and the lower, we're not providing an argument, but the dot count requires an argument, right? So I could just write O here, and when I run this code, it will tell me how many times O appears. So just like the in operator we looked at, the in operator only returns true or false. That is O in this string true, is it not false, and so on. But the dot count method will actually go through the string and return how many times that character you've given to it occurs in that string, right? That is basically what the dot count method does. And with that, we've come to an end of our lecture. If anything confused you, like, you could put a comment or you could ask Renee to clarify on what has confused you, right? You just have to keep on studying about this, and trust me, it will be a second name for you. Thank you, and God bless you, and goodbye. That is that from me.